All right, welcome back to DogFoodCon. We are joined by Victor Pudelski, who gave a talk on Git. What was your talk called?
My talk was on Git Merge, resets, and branches.
Git Merge, resets, and branches. What about those? What were you talking about?
I was just talking about basically any developer who's not used to doing those types of changes, what it entails, how to do them, how they're not as scary as they sound, and how easy it can be to collaborate with multiple developers.
Yeah, did people receptive to that?
People seem really receptive. I was surprised. The room was rather full. First question I asked how many people knew Git, and almost every hand went up. And then I'm like, all right, how many Git experts are there? And all the hands dropped. So it was good to see that many people in the room. And there was a lot of really great feedback on best practices, when to do certain things. Just a really great class all around.
Yeah, I was curious, like what you would have thought of as your target audience for a talk like that, because I think some people probably look at that and go, well, I already know about Git, like I use it every day, but like are there, and Git's very popular, but I imagine there's got to be a lot of developers that don't already use it or that do use it but are like scared of it. Are those the people that you were looking for?
And that's kind of the target I was going for, is either the junior developer who hasn't done it before, or that developer who's not willing to admit that they haven't done it before. Because I've worked at numerous organizations. Oh, we have source control. We use Git and all that. And I go look at the source control databases and whatnot. And they're not doing any merges. They're not doing any branches. Everybody's working off of master.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get just chaos when you have multiple people working on the same piece of code at the same time.
Well, how do those people live? Like, well, I don't understand what the process would even look like. I guess as a team grows, that becomes so unwieldy. Like, also, what's a rebase?
What's a rebase?
What is a rebase?
A rebase is, instead of a merge where you're taking the 2 points and just joining them together,
Yeah.
you're actually taking all of your changes and rewriting them to the end of the history.
Why would I do that?
I have no idea why you would really do it in practice.
Don't do that.
Because what's going to happen is you're going to lose the history of when those changes started, why they started, things like that. And all it's going to do is it'll make a nice, pretty line for the history of the main source branch. But you lose a lot of history, and you're rewriting the history too, which can be dangerous depending on what you're doing.
So it's like you're taking something that you did 6 months ago and going, abracadabra, I just did that yesterday. Like,
Pretty much. That's pretty much exactly what you're doing.
oh, so this is just a strategy for like going to stand up and telling my boss I did all this stuff yesterday, but actually I already did this 6 months ago. Because I need to
I don't know that you'd want to admit to that, because then what did you do 6 months ago? You did that all yesterday.
Yeah, right.
That's a good point. I use Git every day, and I feel like I still don't understand most things. And it's because, well, I mean, I've started to understand it more. Okay, here's the thing. Like, I used to use the GUI thing, like source safe or whatever.
tree?
Source tree?
Source tree, yeah. And I used it because I didn't understand Git
Yeah.
at all, right? And, like, having it laid out visually, I thought helped me. But it really made it so that I didn't actually understand it in any way, because it hid all of the details of how it actually works for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, I don't know, now I couldn't even imagine using a GUI tool for Git. Like, it would feel so foreign to me because I do everything on the command line. Because, you know what, the reality is, if you read the things, it's actually pretty clear what's happening. Like,
Oh, it's extremely clear. Those error messages tell you exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Where if you're using one of the GUIs, sometimes it tells you a fraction of the information that you have there.
Yeah.
I've actually known developers who've used the GUIs who all they know is, well, that file's the wrong color. I have to click these buttons to change the color.
Well, yeah. I always encourage, like, when people started moving to Git at my company, like, I had pretty much started on it, and that was all I knew. So Subversion, getting old code was like, what is this? But the first thing they would usually do is get source tree. I'm like, I don't want to say this exactly, but you should not use that. Because you will not understand what's going on. And it's funny because if you go back to source tree after you do know what's going on, you realize that a lot of the words are the same, and you can understand how this maps back to that. But that relationship doesn't go the other way. Like, you're not going to look at source tree and go, I know what Git does. It's not going to happen. And the only thing I really use it for now is like diff tools, because it looks way nice. I'm not
Diff tools, I'll occasionally use the GUI tools for the diff tools, just because it's so much nicer to have the layout that those GUI tools use. But even for the diffs, I've been at a developer's desk and I'll just type the git diff command and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm diffing the file. They're like, that's still the terminal window. It's like, so I just need to see a couple of things of what went wrong, and that they're freaked out that you're completely in the terminal.
I used to think that those little lines in source tree that showed the branches and where changes went and like that, I felt like that helped me understand it, but in hindsight that confused the hell out of me.
I'm still confused by those, honestly. Like, I can't read those.
I remember once talking to a developer and I'm like, why do you use the GUI? And he's like, because it gives me the nice view of the history. And there's a way in the Git log that you can, it's like decorate, I think, where you can actually draw all those lines on the side of the terminal window if you wanted. So you could even have that in the terminal still. But it sometimes helps you visualize it. Like, I've had occasions where 4 developers were working on code and somehow created 6 different strings within that. It's nice to be able to visualize what could have happened there, but I mean, 9 times out of 10, I just need the terminal window and the normal commands.
Right.
I usually use GitHub itself, really, to browse the history of stuff. Like, I find that reasonable, because you can go history on a file, and it just shows you linearly, like, every commit that was led up to that file. I like that.
That I like. I use that with both GitHub and Bitbucket.
Right. I don't think, like, in GitHub, it has a lot of nice, like, visualization tools like that. But like, it's not a substitute for using Git on your command line or on your machine the way that like source tree tries to make the command line go away, like, so it's safe in that way. And also, I always thought, I sort of only recently realized that when you talk about things like pull requests, like, that's not really a Git thing. That's like a GitHub thing.
That's a GitHub thing.
Like, it doesn't really exist in Git. That whole thing is, but you can restrict what people do.
The term pull request confused me for so long. Just because it's tied to a Git command called pull. It's not tied. It has nothing to do with Git pull. But for some reason, I mean, I understand how the name got there now.
Right.
I guess. Like, I'm saying that, but
I'm
like, I couldn't.
requesting you to Git pull my code.
Right. Sure. But like, the terminology is I don't know. I found that very confusing, and I had no idea that pull request was just a GitHub thing for so long. And I'm like, in Git, I'm like, how do I do this? And like,
that's all interface stuff, because Git itself, it's you're pulling in those changes. But the pull request itself is no different than creating an issue that says, hey, I want to do this. It's just more direct on the repository that you've got these changes sitting out here, now you want to merge them in, but somebody has to okay that.
Right. And also, it can come from anywhere, really. Like, the you have 2 different repos, and we're just like copying files from one to another, and like, that's just GitHub facilitating that and then putting a nice little GUI around it.
All the access controls too, like if we have a lot of things in the Git workflow at work with like protected branches where you can't just push changes to develop. Like, you gotta go through a pull request, and like, there's nothing in Git that's actually stopping you. If you merge that locally, like, you're going to fucking regret it. But like, you can't hurt anything because you can't push it. It's all just on GitHub or Bitbucket or wherever you are is the only ones like enforcing what you can do. Because they're the ones hosting it, which makes sense, which is the point where Git is not really decentralized, because I've got to get it from somewhere.
Yeah, but that's more convention, I think. Like, like, I could get my repo directly from you if I wanted to. It's just, well, the reality is that like, every team has to have a system of record, basically. And so like that's like, yeah, I remember like when Git became a thing, like I used Subversion for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
Right, and people would talk about Git like it's this decentralized version of Subversion, and I'm like, what are you talking about? We have a server, like where all the code is, and that's where we do our builds from. It's the exact same thing, and like I never understood the use case that was, you know, my repo directly to your repo. I don't think anybody actually does that.
I've never really seen that done in practice. I mean, the closest thing I can get with the decentralized is there'll be a system of record that all the developers pull from, and then a second repository that's almost an exact copy of that for the CI/CD workflows that people will do. Is they won't do them directly off of the one developers are pulling from for whatever reason.
Why?
It's the closest I've been able to see.
Yeah.
I mean, the only use case I can even think of, and that I've only ever come across, is if for some reason, and nowadays I have no idea how this would happen, but you're completely without internet for days, weeks, whatever it takes, and you need to get a copy of a repository, well then I could get the copy from you instead of having to get it from the central.
Yeah.
I could just take whatever changes you have at that point, copy it to my machine, and then start working off of that.
Right. Which I guess you couldn't really do in SVN.
You couldn't do that.
No,
You
yeah.
probably,
I mean,
SVN, you probably would have problems. SourceSafe is the one that I came from. You definitely couldn't have done it there. SourceSafe, you had to check out files. As soon as you checked it out, well, Pat checked out that file. He owns it. Nobody else can modify it.
it's honestly probably being used more today now that GitHub is restricting access to certain repositories based on where you are in the world.
oh my god.
Like I was reading a bunch of articles of people writing web apps and stuff in Iran, right? And they're like, all of a sudden, all the libraries, none of them load from anywhere because, apparently GitHub blocked everybody from Iran from accessing GitHub. And it's like, well, how are they going to work? Like, how are they going to do things? Like, these are just normal people making, normal web apps and stuff, and now they're just hamstrung. So I'm sure that in those kind of scenarios, people are going directly from other repos. It's like, I need a friend to copy this to their computer, and I guess I'll get it from them. But it's like, man, what a hassle. But I guess it wouldn't even be possible in the old systems. And, it's like, sometimes I guess these decentralized ideas are cool even if they're not actively used because they do allow you to, route around censorship in that way, I guess.
Right, because I mean, even in that scenario, so you're in Iran, you can no longer get to the GitHub, but you have the repository locally, you could create it up on Bitbucket, post it there, and then everybody could start pulling from Bitbucket until either GitHub comes back online or forget GitHub now or Bitbucket.
Yeah, that actually, I've noticed that those communities are moving to, I think GitLab is getting a lot of
GitLab
traction.
is another one.
Yeah.
I started using that.
Yeah, how you like it?
It's pretty nice. I started using it to kind of play with the CI/CD tools a little bit. I haven't gotten into it enough, but I mean, for basic source code repository, they're all really similar.
Yeah.
It's just a preference of which interface you like more.
Yeah, the GitLab one feels a lot different to me than like the GitHub and Bitbucket ones that are almost the same. But ultimately, you can do all the same things. You just get different buttons to get there.
Right.
What kind
and
of
that,
stuff is different?
It just looks different. Like the
There's-
menus just don't have the same things, and you can't search in the same way. Like it's really minor stuff, honestly. But like it just felt different. I was like, oh, it took me a while to realize that GitLab and GitHub were actually like the same thing.
yeah, it's the biggest change is all the CI/CD tools because like GitHub, you're not doing, your automated testing or anything like that through GitHub. Same thing with Bitbucket, and so those menu options aren't there. Because some of those menu options are there, they might have renamed certain things to make it more clear what they're for.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, and overall, I mean, it's the same kind of thing, just a different feel for what you're trying to do.
I've seen some companies working on a decentralized version of GitHub that I thought was pretty interesting, and building it off of these. There's a new technology I like called IPFS, Interplanetary File System, and it's basically like instead of instead of asking, I want this file from a google.com server, right? You just go, I want this file, and I want this file from the network. And it is a peer-to-peer network, and anybody who has the file can give it to you, and you basically request it by the SHA hash of the file. So when you get it back, no matter who you got it from, you can verify like automatically.
Definitely the same file.
It's definitely the same file, and now it's not even important where it came from anymore. And like I think that's a really cool idea that builds on the basic framework that get laid in place with the decentralization. And like, okay, maybe we'll take it all the way.
Sure.
Like now, you know, GitHub may host stuff, but like you're not the only place I can get this stuff from. If you block me, I'll just go to my friend and get it.
Everything is Git now, is what we're saying.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about IPFS is it essentially makes the entire internet Git at all times.
It's like, what if Git and Napster had a baby, and it was the entire internet?
Yeah.
This is the start of like a religion in a couple hundred years, I think.
Oh yeah.
The Git religion?
Yeah,
Git
like
gods?
the gospel of Git.
Well, Linux is already a weird cult in that way, so it's
I
gonna
mean,
fit.
we're ready. We got
Yeah.
all the pizzas.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You
So,
heard it here first.
um,
Yeah, we went really way off, like, how do you rebase and,
Yeah.
and organize stuff with that, but,
so okay, what kind of do you have any tips for teams that are working with Git to make it easier for their developers to learn this kind of stuff?
I mean, the best place to start is just with the basic tutorials, stuff like that. I love Atlassian's tutorials. I think they've got great documentation. The other thing I would tell anybody using Git, commit often.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of issues where developers are like, well, I didn't have that working or I didn't have that done, so I didn't commit for a week.
Oh yeah. Why would you do that?
Why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah.
Just commit. Also, pulling changes from like the common code base more often than just when you're merging.
Right.
That'll help you resolve some of those conflicts earlier in the process. And then when you're at that final stage of, okay, now I need to join the two, it's not going to be as bad. Especially if it's been, weeks or months or whatever before you merge it back in. Other than that, I mean, it's really just get comfortable with the tools. I always recommend every new developer use the terminal before you go to a GUI.
Yeah.
I won't deter developers from a GUI, but I tell them, like, you got to know how to do it in the terminal before you use SourceTree or Git Kraken or any of those other ones.
I know that I was reluctant at first to commit often because I was coming from old source control tools where committing would share it with the team.
right.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, I'm not ready to share that, so I can't commit it. But now that, so I would bet that when people are reluctant to do it, it's because they don't understand what commit is actually doing.
Right, because that was the thing with, like, or I was thinking with SVN, like, you can't just... You can't just like work offline in the same way because committing
Right.
is pushing.
Yeah.
Where
Right.
in Git they've separated commit your changes
You
from
commit it.
publish your changes. Those are separate things.
Yeah.
And it's important because you want to commit often, but you might not need to push often. As often. You should probably.
You still
but
could.
at least for you, like, even if you don't push, at least if you commit, you can go back to whatever you just did without going like, oh shit, I don't remember what the changes were that I just made since
Yeah.
last time it worked.
Like commit and Git, like, I was reluctant at the beginning when I started learning about Git because, like, I guess I was coming from that, but like, it's like I tend to do it now anytime whenever I would save a Word document. Right?
Right.
Like, I just want a record that this happened. And if I ever want to go back and look at what it looked like at that point, I can. And if anytime I make I fix a bug, right?
Yeah.
And I commit that exact bug change, right? And like, I may be fixing 10 bugs.
Right.
I don't actually want to push any of those yet. Like, I'll make 10 different commits for 10 different bugs
Oh, yeah.
because separating those is super important, and it's super easy now because like if I later need to go back and change that, I can. Like it's not set in stone.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's where the one place I worked, I told the developer, I'm like, if you're afraid of committing to the common code base, create your own branch, have your own developer branch,
Yeah.
commit there as often as you want, and then merge it back all at once later. And especially like you talked about with issues, why not commit every time you solve an issue? I mean, the only time I've ever solved multiple issues on one commit is because, well, the code change that I made actually fixed two different things.
Oh yeah.
They were pretty much the same bug, but nobody knew that because, two different effects in the UI. But absolutely, they commit often. Why not?
I had no idea about that until I kind of worked as a release manager and realizing, it's super important to be able to cherry pick a bug and roll it back. Like, okay, that broke production, right? So like, let's surgically take that code and rip it out, and then, okay, we can have production work again, and we didn't have to roll back everything.
Right.
But if you don't have the discipline to actually make a commit every time you fix a thing, that becomes impossible.
Yeah.
Like, you either have to roll back the entirety of the entire thing or leave it broken in production. And, like, that's a terrible option.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's where, too, even if you don't want to do rolling back and all of that, if you can identify that commit that change happened in, well, at least now I can diff it and see what the heck changed so that I know what broke the original code.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's where how many times have developers broken a build and, hey, nobody has any idea who broke it because 30 developers all committed at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that gets people sometimes, at least from what I have heard from like people at my job talking about like Git workflows and stuff, is that some people get really hung up on what their history looks like. Like, they don't want too much history, or like they don't want it to be all like, I don't know, confusing. They want to look at it and it's a pretty little graph, and it's like, well, first of all, like, okay, that's silly. But like, I feel like that's where you get into weird things like squashing and rebasing and like all this stuff that like you introduce a lot of risk to like
absolutely.
your legitimate, accurate history and understanding what happened because you want it to be pretty.
Yeah. Well, I think they want it to be pretty too because they feel insecure about their own work.
Oh my God.
And they don't want anybody to be able to go back and see the mistakes that they
I don't want anyone to see that it took me somehow 4 merges to get one thing in because I forgot to pull 8 times. Like, I don't want people to know that either. But like, also, you just think nobody's gonna go back and read that unless there's a real reason to. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I've had the same experience. I've had project managers. Why can't we just have it be a nice, one line and not all this branching and stuff? I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
Who is looking at this?
I
If
think
they
it's
actually
a
care?
problem for you.
He was like,
Yeah.
well, I was going to put a screenshot of it in the document. I'm like, for what? Nobody's going to know what that is. It's going to look like a pretty little graph with all
Yeah.
kinds of lines.
And then you're going to check that in, or you're going to commit that to Git, and it's going to ruin your line.
Right. I told him, I'm like, I'm not rewriting the history of the repository because you want a single line instead of all the merges that happen in between.
There's lots of image editing tools. Draw a line yourself. And
Look how straight it is.
It's
It's like perfect.
Absolutely. I'd rather see him do that than... Yeah, developers, can you go rewrite that history? It just doesn't look good.
Don't do it. It's scary. And that part's scary for a reason. Merging doesn't have to be scary.
No, not at all.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything you want to promote? LinkedIn, Twitter?
No, not really.
What's your Twitter?
My Twitter is VJ Pudelski.
Okay.
And then that's pretty much my hook for everything, for LinkedIn, for Twitter, Facebook, any of it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Victor.
Awesome.